We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Hong Kong student leaders announced a 2-week boycott of lectures from the upcoming start of term as they seek to keep protesters on the streets and pressure on the government.
The Trump administration announced a new regulation that will allow migrant families to be detained longer.
South Korea said it will terminate its military intelligence sharing pact with Japan amid intensifying trade and diplomatic disputes with Tokyo.
And in Brooklyn, New York, 2 weeks after a shooting tragedy in Brownsville, the community gathered for an afternoon of neighborly love and much needed relief.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Hong Kong student leaders announced a 2-week boycott of lectures from the upcoming start of term as they seek to keep protesters on the streets and pressure on the government. Take a look. The financial hub has been rocked by 3 months of unrest, making up a large number of the pro-democracy protesters taking to the streets almost daily. Now, student leaders representing most of the city's major universities said students will miss lectures between September 2, the planned start of the new term, and September 13. They threatened further action if the government doesn't adequately respond to the protesters' 5 demands, which include spiking a controversial extradition bill, universal suffrage, and an independent inquiry into alleged police abuses during the protests.
Hundreds of masked protesters used bins and ticket machines as barricades against riot police late Wednesday at a Flashpoint Hong Kong metro station, where they earlier marked 1 month since a mob attack by suspected Triad gang members. That assault on July 21 had pushed the city deeper into political violence, but the sit-in on Wednesday was largely peaceful until police vans arrived at the Yen Long station close to the Chinese border and the atmosphere soured. Some protesters put on hard hats and gas masks, while others sprayed fire extinguishers and poured detergent, beer and oil on the concourse to impede entry by the police, who had massed outside. The demonstration was convened to mark a month since a gang wearing white t-shirts and armed with poles and sticks set upon anti-government protesters unarmed and dressed in black at the metro station. The attack left nearly 50 people, including passers-by, in hospital, some with horrific wounds. Hong Kong's police were heavily criticized for being slow to respond, fueling rumors of collusion. Police denied any links to the attack.
I think a peaceful protest or rally, it's a good choice to express our feelings, but at the same time, the government and Carrie Lam has been ignoring our voice for 2 months already, so I feel like sometimes we have to upgrade our actions to show our anger and show we care about Hong Kong so much.
Meanwhile, 2 Hong Kong police officers were arrested on Tuesday after a video emerged of them beating an older man on a hospital trolley, heaping further pressure on a force already facing accusations of brutality. Take a look. Now, this footage, recorded in late June, shows 2 uniformed officers assaulting the man with batons and holding a cloth over his mouth. There are no other people in the room as the officers take turns to abuse the patient over several minutes.
It is clear that the action committed by the police officers concerned are unlawful. Police will not tolerate any illegal assault or mistreatment of any person by any police officers. 2 involved police officers were just arrested for assault occasioning actual bodily harm. It's the first time the police have seen the video today, so the allegation is we were informed, but covering up the incident is totally false.
Pro-democracy protesters who have staged weeks of rallies throughout the city have called for an independent inquiry into the police response, which has included frequent use of tear gas and rubber bullets.
Beijing on Thursday accused Ottawa of worsening bilateral relations after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau vowed to stand up to China amid deepening diplomatic and trade disputes. The 2 countries have been locked in a feud since last December when Canada detained top Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, and in an apparent retaliation, China detained 2 Canadian nationals over espionage-linked accusations. On Wednesday, Trudeau pushed back against Beijing in a speech that promised to always defend Canadians and Canadian interests and to not back down.
当前中加关系遭遇了严重困难，责任完全在加方。加方很清楚当前中加关系的症结，有理不在声高，公道自在人心。我们敦促加方反省错误，认真对待中方的严正立场和关切，立即释放孟晚舟，平安回国。香港事务纯属中国内政，不容任何国家组织和个人干预。加方没有任何资格和权利来妄议香港事务。我们希望加方能够遵循基本的国际法和国际关系基本准则，停止在香港事务上说三道四、指手画脚、干涉中国内政。
He also called on Canada to refrain from making irresponsible remarks about Hong Kong, which has been plunged into weeks of unrest by pro-democracy demonstrations. Beijing had warned Canada on Sunday to stop meddling in Hong Kong affairs after Ottawa and the European Union issued a joint statement in support of protesters' fundamental right of assembly. Canadians are one of the largest expatriate groups in Hong Kong, numbering 300,000 according to Canadian government figures. Relations between Canada and China tumbled over the arrest of Meng on a U.S. extradition request related to alleged Iran sanctions. Since then, China has arrested Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kofrig while blocking millions or billions of dollars in Canadian agricultural equipments.
The Trump administration announced a new regulation that will allow migrant families to be detained longer. Take a look. The Department of Homeland Security said it was terminating the 1997 Flores Settlement Agreement, a binding legal ruling that said the government could not hold migrant children in detention for more than 20 days. The administration says the current rule forces officials to either release immigrant families together or to separate them. They say there is no longer a need for the court involvement, which was only meant to be temporary. But the new policy, which will be implemented in 60 days, will not limit how long children or their families can be detained.
This year, we have seen an unprecedented flow of family units, primarily from Central America, coming to our southwest border. During the first 10 months of this fiscal year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection apprehended or encountered almost 475,000 families, 90% of whom crossed our border unlawfully between ports of entry, 3 times more than any previous full-year record. The Trump administration has established a new rule to respond to the realities of current immigration flows, a rule based in the principle that families should remain together during immigration proceedings. While the Flores Settlement Agreement is operationally outdated and does not respond to the current immigration crisis, it has many important aspects and principles, like the need for special protections for children and high standards for government facilities. First and foremost, the new rule permanently establishes standards of care in custody for children and families. These standards are high. In doing so, the rule fulfills one of the central, original purposes of the 1997 Flores Court Settlement Agreement to ensure appropriate care for all children. The facilities that we will be using to temporarily house families under this rule are appropriately fundamentally different than the facilities where migrants are processed following apprehension or encounter at the border. They are campus-like settings with appropriate medical, educational, recreational, dining, and private housing facilities. For example, the First Family Residential Center in Berks, Pennsylvania has suites where each family is housed separately. Furniture, bedding, towels, clothing, and toiletries are provided. There's a large community living room that has big screen television, cushioned couches and lounge chairs, a gaming area, and a separate library that contains books, other television sets, video games, and board games. The facility also has an entire wing dedicated to classroom learning where minors at the facility go to school 5 days a week. Another wing is a medical facility where minors and their parents receive any necessary medical care, including all immunizations required for later admission to U.S. public schools. There are also phone banks to call relatives, consulates, attorneys, or other representatives. In all family residential centers, 3 hot meals a day are provided, and snacks are available throughout the day. All of our 3 family residential centers offer a variety of indoor and outdoor daily recreation activities. For children and adults, indoor activities offered include a variety of sports, group exercise classes, arts and crafts classes, movie nights, and even seasonal holiday-themed activities. Outdoor recreational facilities include soccer fields, volleyball courts, and play structures. There's no intent to hold families for a long period of time. In fact, we have the prior experience that shows we were able to average under 50 days. That is the intent for a fair but expeditious immigration proceeding.
The Flores rule was the result of a lawsuit citing chronic abuse of migrants in detention. It required they receive adequate humane care and that migrant children would have to be released within 20 days and placed in the custody of their parents or relatives. Faced with tens of thousands of mostly Central American migrant families and unaccompanied children crossing the border every month, President Trump's administration has been accused of violating Flores conditions and also separating children from their parents who remained held indoor in order to meet the 20-day requirement.
But let me just tell you, very much I have the children on my mind. It bothers me very greatly. People make this horrible 2,000-mile journey. One of the things that will happen when they realize the borders are closing, the wall is being built. We're building tremendous numbers of miles of wall right now in different locations. It all comes together like a beautiful puzzle. But one of the things that's happening when they see you can't get into the United States, or when they see if they do get in the United States, they will be brought back to their country. It won't matter if they get in or not, because we're doing that. They won't come, and many people will be saved, and many women's lives will not be destroyed and ruined.
Migrant and human rights groups said they would challenge the abrogation of Flores and accuse the government of mistreating migrants. American Civil Liberties Union official Maduri Gruel said this is yet another cruel attack on children who the Trump administration has targeted again and again with its anti-immigrant policies. She said the government should not be jailing kids and certainly shouldn't be seeking to put more kids in jail for longer.
Indonesia's blocked internet access in unrest hit Papua over fears that a stream of offensive and racist posts online will spark more violent protests in the region, the government said. Riots and demonstrations brought several Papuan cities to a standstill this week as buildings were torched and street battles broke out between police and protesters in Indonesia's easternmost territory. A rebel insurgency against Jakarta's rule has simmered for decades in the island region, which shares a border with Papua New Guinea. But the riots appear to have been triggered by the arrest of dozens of Papuan students who were also pelted with racist abuse in Java at the weekend. Indonesia slowed internet service in recent days to clamp down on hoaxes, provocative comments, and racist abuse targeting Papua's ethnic Melanesian population, but it shut down service completely late Wednesday. In Jakarta, more than 100 demonstrators calling for Papuan independence scuffled with police near the presidential palace, while dozens of placard-holding demonstrators protested in Bali's capital, Denpasar. The unrest was sparked by reports that authorities tear-gassed and briefly detained some 43 Papuan university students in Surabaya, Indonesia's second biggest city, on Saturday, the country's Independence Day.
Wildfires in the Amazon rainforest in northern Brazil have ignited a firestorm on social media, with President Jair Bolsonaro suggesting green groups started the blazes. Images of fire purportedly devouring sections of the world's largest rainforest have gone viral on Twitter. The hashtag Pray for Amazon is the top trending hashtag on the world on Wednesday, with more than 249,000 tweets. Now, official figures show nearly 73,000 forest fires were recorded in Brazil in the first 8 months of the year, the highest number for any year since 2013, and most were in the Amazon. Now, that compares with 39,759 in all of 2018, according to the embattled National Institute for Space Research, which has been in Bolsonaro's crosshairs since it released data showing a surge in deforestation in recent months. The head of the INPE, the agency tasked with monitoring forest clearing, was sacked over the figures. Brazil's President Bolsonaro hit back on Wednesday, saying criminal action by those NGOs to call attention against the Brazilian government following funding cuts may be the reason for the forest fires.
No Brasil, a questão da queimada na Amazônia, que no meu entender pode ter sido potencializada por ONGs, porque eles perderam grana, tá? Com a intenção de trazer problemas para o Brasil.
The WWF has blamed this year's sharp increase on accelerating deforestation in the Amazon, which is seen as crucial to keeping the climate change in check. Forest fires tend to intensify during the dry season, which usually ends in late October or early November as land is cleared to make way for crops or grazing. Meanwhile, co-founder of the Igarape Institute and political scientist Robert Muga says that the deforestation of the Amazon will not only affect Brazil and South America, but it will have consequences for the rest of the world.
I mean, the reality is that Brazil actually did make incredible strides at reducing deforestation and fires over the last 15 years. It's really in the last 4 to 5 years that we saw an increase in deforestation and degradation, and especially in the last year where we saw a 50% increase on deforestation as compared to the previous year. It also affects evapotranspiration, which is essentially the cloud cover that moderates our climate in Brazil and all across South America, but also the oceans around the world. So the fact that we're seeing this happening right now in Brazil isn't just bad for Brazil and the cities of Brazil, which are affected by pollution and water shortages. It's a problem for the world.
President Trump wants to be taken seriously. The president is mad at Denmark's premier in a row over his desire to buy Greenland. President Trump said her blunt refusal to consider any negotiation was nasty.
Not to go to Denmark? Is it really because they wouldn't talk about selling Greenland?
No, Denmark, I look forward to going, but I thought that the Prime Minister's statement that it was absurd, it was an absurd idea, was nasty. I thought it was an inappropriate statement. All she had to do is say, no, we wouldn't be interested, but we can't treat the United States of America the way they treated us under President Obama. I thought it was a very not nice way of saying something. They could have told me no. This is something that's been discussed for many years. Harry Truman had the idea of Greenland. I had the idea. Other people have had the idea. It goes back into the early 1900s. But Harry Truman very strongly thought it was a good idea. I think it's a good idea because Denmark is losing $700 million a year with it. It doesn't do them any good, but all they had to do is say, no, we'd rather not do that, or we'd rather not talk about it. Don't say what an absurd idea that is. She's not talking to me.
Mr. President.
Excuse me. She's not talking to me. She's talking to the United States of America. You don't talk to the United States that way, at least under me. Now, President Obama, when they wouldn't let him land in the Philippines, when they treated him so badly in so many places, the Philippines is one that comes to mind. That's different. That's different. They can treat him any way they want to. That's up to him. But they can't treat the United States with a statement, how absurd.
President Trump canceled a state visit to a stunned Denmark. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen told reporters that she was annoyed and surprised at Trump's decision, but insisted that U.S.-Danish relations remain strong.
It is with regret and surprise that I received the news that President Trump has cancelled his state visit to Denmark on the 2nd and 3rd September. I had been looking forward to the visit. Our preparations were well underway. It was an opportunity, I think, to celebrate Denmark's close relationship to U.S.
The president, a former real estate magnate, has been curious about the area's natural resources and geopolitical relevance. Denmark colonized the 772,000 square mile, or that's a 2 million square kilometer island, in the 18th century. The territory is home to the U.S. Air Base Thule, crucial during the Cold War as a first line of monitoring against a potential Russian attack. But the melting polar ice sheet is opening up potentially major shipping routes, and untapped reserves of oil, gas and minerals will become increasingly accessible, leading Russia and China to show mounting interest in the region. As far back as 1867, the U.S. State Department expressed interest in the island, and in 1946, President Harry S. Truman offered $100 million in gold or parts of Alaska in exchange for Greenland.
So the number of forest fires in Brazil surged in the first 8 months of 2019, according to official data, as President Jair Bolsonaro faces growing criticism over rampant destruction of the Amazon. Nearly 73,000 fires were recorded between January and August, compared with 39,759 in all of 2018. That is according to the National Institute for Space Research. Now, that is the highest number of forest fires for any year since 2013 and follows 2 years of decline. Take a look. Forest covers 30% of the world's total land mass. Yet the destruction of tropical forests continues at a pace. In 2018, the world lost 12 million hectares. That's the size of Nicaragua. 3.6 million hectares of that was primary forest, a crucial loss in terms of carbon storage and biodiversity. An increase in agricultural land, logging, forest fires linked to climate change, and mining are the main drivers of deforestation. The destruction of primary rainforests, equivalent in 2018 to an area the size of Belgium, takes place mainly in 5 countries. Brazil, where the Amazon forest is destroyed for mining and agriculture. The Democratic Republic of Congo, where industrial-scale logging is to blame. Indonesia, where tree cover has given way to palm oil producers well as logging. Colombia, where areas of forest long occupied by FARC rebels have been opened up since a peace accord in 2016. And Bolivia, where forest is replaced by arable and pasture land. The consequences are the disappearance of natural habitats for flora and fauna, soil erosion leading to landslips and mudslides, resulting in flooding and disruption to the water cycle, climate change as there is less rainfall, increased global warming.
The World Health Organization released an analysis of current research related to microplastics in drinking water, calling for a reduction in plastic pollution to benefit the environment and reduce human exposure.
From the health review, the current evidence is not suggesting any cause for concern. However, there are big data gaps. This is a report that looked at drinking water alone. When we look in the future at food and airborne particulates, microplastic particulates, the case may evolve. And so that is a major concern for research, is to look at the wider environment, and also to make sure that when we look at microplastics, we look with standardized methods so we can have reproducible and comparable metrics so we can understand where the problem is going. So the health risk can be basically classified in 3 pillars. The first pillar is the physical hazards presented by the particle itself. So even though plastic is generally considered inert, doesn't chemically react, it can diffuse in the human body, and there were concerns about that. So we looked at that. The second is the chemicals in the plastics themselves. And the third is bacterial colonization of the particles.
According to the analysis, which summarizes the latest knowledge on microplastics in drinking water, microplastics larger than 150 micrometers are not likely to be absorbed in the human body, and uptake of smaller particles is expected to be limited. Absorption and distribution of very small microplastic particles, including in the nano-size range, may, however, be higher, although the data is extremely limited.
Our main concern is absolutely having safe drinking water. We know now in the world that 2 billion people are exposed to water that's contaminated with human feces, and that causes immediate illnesses like cholera and typhoid that kill. So regulators need to keep their priorities straight and focus on, basic disinfection and filtration of water supplies, which in most cases will reduce the amount of microplastics anyway.
Further research is needed to obtain a more accurate assessment of exposure to microplastics and their potential impacts on human health. These include developing standard methods for measuring microplastic particles in water, more studies on the sources and occurrence of microplastics in fresh water, and the efficacy of different treatment processes.
WHO is recommending that major work be done to better manage plastic pollution. This is the root cause of this whole issue, and it's a complicated one. It has everything to do with better recycling, to better consumer behavior, to better policies. So we need to clean up our environment.
WHO recommends drinking water suppliers and regulators prioritize removing microbial pathogens and chemicals that are known risks to human health, such as those causing deadly diarrheal diseases. This has a double advantage. Wastewater and drinking water treatment systems that treat Fecal content and chemicals are also effective in removing microplastics. Water or wastewater treatment can remove more than 90% of microplastics from wastewater, with the highest removal coming from tertiary treatment such as filtration. Conventional drinking water treatment can remove particles smaller than a micrometer. A significant proportion of the global population currently does not benefit from adequate water and sewage treatment. By addressing the problem of human exposure to fecally contaminated water, communities can simultaneously address the concern related to microplastics.
To other news now, Spanish police have arrested a man suspected of secretly recording videos of the underwear of over 500 women, some of them minors, on public transit and supermarkets. Take a look. Police said the man allegedly used a mobile phone concealed inside a backpack, which he placed on the ground to take pictures up women's skirts in Madrid without their consent, a practice known as upskirting. He then uploaded at least 283 of these videos to a pornographic site where they were viewed over 1 million times. Police arrested a 53-year-old Colombian national while he was in the act of recording up the dress of a woman on the Madrid metro using a strategically placed mobile phone in his backpack. Police said the man has been charged with violating privacy, corruption, as well as child abuse and child prostitution since some of his victims were underage. He has been remanded in custody pending his trial. And the news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Sa gitna ng dilim, ako ang mata sa sahing papawid. Ako ang dilat sa tuwing ang bayan ko ay tulog ng mahimbing. Ang aming buhay handang ialay para sa bayan. Kayo'y handang paglingkuran.
Join us in celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the Philippine Air Force.
U.S. President Donald Trump proclaimed himself the chosen one as he defended his trade war against China, indicating that it was his destiny to take on Beijing. Trump said his predecessors had allowed the United States to be taken advantage of on trade and intellectual property, and it had befallen him to undo the damage. Trump has slapped a steep tariff on $250 billion in Chinese goods, with a further $300 billion in imports targeted for new duties in 2 more rounds, September 1 and December 15. Despite warnings from the IMF that his trade war is slowing global growth and growing signs that the U.S. may be headed for recession, Trump has shown little sign of easing off against China, although trade talks are due to resume next month.
Over the last 5 or 6 years, China's made $500 billion. $500 billion. Ripped it out of the United States. And not only that, if you take a look, intellectual property theft, add that to it, and add a lot of other things to it. So somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it. So I'm taking on China. I'm taking on China on trade. And you know what? We're winning. Because we're the piggy bank. We're the one that all these countries, including the European Union, wants to rob and takes advantage of. European Union, $200 billion. China, more than $500 billion. Sorry. I was put here by people. I was put here by people to do a great job. And that's what I'm doing. And nobody's done a job like I've.
Israel and South Korea announced they have concluded a free trade agreement to eliminate tariffs on goods ranging from cars to video games.
We've had free trade agreements in other parts of the world with the United States, with Europe, and elsewhere, but this is the first free trade agreement we have with an Asian economy, and what an economy, a global leader, vibrant, advanced economy, and I think our partnership will do tremendous good for both our economies. I'm sure it will multiply our trade, which is already standing at $2.5 billion. It will grow a lot. And secondly, I think that this will also offer for Israeli consumers decreased prices, the removal of customs, for example, for Korean cars. Everybody drives Korean cars.
As you mentioned, this is very significant historic agreement, and both countries, Korea and Israel, we have a lot of similarities, and also we have complementary economic structure. So based on this FTA, I'm sure that we will further promote our trade and investment, as well as further promote our technology cooperation.
Before Wednesday's ceremony, the pending agreement had been the subject of political controversy in Israel over claims it would not apply to goods from Israeli settlements. Israeli Economy Minister Eli Cohen denied that was the case and said if businesses in settlements were in any way disadvantaged, they would be compensated by the government, as is the case with other trade deals. The issue is a sensitive one in Israel, particularly ahead of September 17 elections. Israeli settlements are viewed as illegal under international law. Negotiations on the agreement stretched 3 years. Trade between the two countries reached $2.5 billion last year, an increase of nearly 15% over 2017, according to Israel's economy ministry. South Korea is home to companies including Samsung, the world's biggest smartphone and memory chip maker, and car maker Hyundai. The deal foresees tariffs removed on Israeli imports of goods, including vehicles, industrial machinery, and video game consoles, according to Israel's economy ministry. Israel exports to South Korea of goods including medical equipment, fertilizer, wine, and cosmetics would also see tariffs eliminated. Israel is a major exporter of arms and defense equipment, but there was no mention of those being included in that deal.
South Korea said it will terminate its military intelligence sharing pact with Japan amid intensifying trade and diplomatic disputes with Tokyo. The decision comes as Seoul and Tokyo are locked in a tit-for-tat trade and diplomatic dispute following a series of South Korean court rulings against Japanese firms requiring them to pay for forced labor during World War II. Japan had removed South Korea from a so-called white list of countries that receive preferential export treatments earlier this month without presenting clear justification, said Kim Yoo-gyun, a national security official at the presidential Blue House in Seoul. He said Tokyo had done so, citing security concerns and a loss of trust with South Korea that caused significant change in the nature of defense cooperation. The dispute between the two U.S. allies has raised concerns over the potential implications for their security cooperation in the face of North Korean missile tests and the possible impact on global supply chains. The intelligence pact was signed in November 2016 with Washington's backing in response to North Korea's missile launches and nuclear tests to better coordinate the gathering of information about the reclusive state.
Going now to the issue of Brexit, during a press conference with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, German Chancellor Angela Merkel voiced hope for a negotiated agreement within 30 days for Britain to leave the EU while avoiding the Irish border backstop rejected by London.
Machen will. Man hat gesagt, die finden wir wahrscheinlich in den nächsten 2 Jahren. Aber man kann sie vielleicht ja auch in den nächsten 30 Tagen finden. Warum nicht? Dann sind wir einen ganzen Schritt weiter und da müssen wir uns anstrengen, dass wir so etwas finden.
Very glad listening to you tonight, Angela, to hear that at least the conversations on that matter can now properly begin. And you've set a very blistering timetable there of 30 days, if I understood you correctly. I'm more than happy with that. I just want to be absolutely clear with all our German friends and with the German government that we in the UK want a deal. We seek a deal. And I believe that we can get one. We can do it. Wir schaffen das, I think is the phrase.
The EU said it won't renegotiate. In his first overseas visit to a fellow leader, Mr. Johnson is meeting Mrs. Merkel after he told the EU the backstop, which aims to prevent a hard Irish border after Brexit, must be ditched if a no-deal exit was to be avoided. The Prime Minister has insisted he wants the UK to leave the EU with a renegotiated withdrawal deal, but the UK must leave on October 31, do or die.
Boris Johnson, Angela Merkel has just asked you.
Britain and South Korea on Thursday signed a deal that will allow the two countries to keep trading freely after Brexit. The deal rolls over existing provisions under an EU trade deal and protects annual bilateral trade flows worth £14.6 billion, or that's 16 billion euros, in 2018. The move was hailed by two major exporters to South Korea, luxury car maker Bentley and the Denby Pottery Company. My priority is to make sure that British businesses are fully prepared for Brexit, International Trade Secretary Liz Truss said in a statement. Truss signed the agreement with South Korean Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee. Today's signing of the FTA, or free trade agreement, will remove much Brexit uncertainty out of our long, valuable economic partnership, Yoo said. It is Britain's first post-Brexit trade deal in Asia and follows similar agreements with nations including Chile, Iceland, Norway, and Switzerland.
And managing work-life balance was on full display at New Zealand's Parliament. Take a look.
He doesn't want to have to explain the numbers to them.
New Zealand's parliamentary speaker is feeding a lawmaker's baby while presiding over a debate. The country's parliamentary speaker, Trevor Mallard, held and fed the 1-month-old son of lawmaker Tamati Kofi while presiding over this debate. In September last year, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made history by bringing her baby along to her debut speech at the UN in New York.
Firstly, can I just very quickly acknowledge your ruling around the use of where this government is letting us down and letting the community.
Amazon, Microsoft, and Intel are among leading tech companies putting the world at risk through killer robot development, according to a report that surveyed major players from the sector about their stance on lethal autonomous weapons. Google, which last year published guiding principles eschewing AI for use in weapon systems, was among 7 companies found to be engaging in best practice in the analysis that spanned 12 countries, as was Japan's SoftBank, best known for its humanoid pepper robot. The use of AI to allow weapon systems to autonomously select and attack targets has sparked ethical debates in recent years, with critics warning they would jeopardize international security. Killer robots sound like something out of a science fiction horror film, but advances in technology mean that fully autonomous weapons could one day become a reality, transforming warfare. Autonomous weapons, which use artificial intelligence to select targets, are already developed, aimed at reducing cost and risk to human soldiers while increasing speed and efficiency in action. Unlike drones, which are operated by humans, killer robots would have some autonomous decision-making ability and capacity to act. Fully autonomous weapons would be capable of acting without any human intervention. They have been described as the third revolution in warfare after gunpowder and nuclear arms. Some of the world's most prominent scientists believe that fully autonomous weapons pose an unacceptable threat to humanity and could trigger an artificial intelligence arms race. In April 2013, a group of non-governmental organizations launched the campaign to stop killer robots, an international coalition working to ban fully autonomous weapons. The International Committee for Robot Arms Control, meanwhile, campaigns for the peaceful use of robotics and regulation of robot weapons.
Meanwhile, tech fanatics have flocked to Beijing's robot conference. Take a look.
安保机器人的应用场景包括像高端社区，还有高端写字楼、商业写字楼、工业园区，还有一些高端的这种商场。那么它可以代替安保去做巡逻，对。
Our EBC correspondent Julianne Ala takes us to a unity games of the Church of Christ. Its aim is not only to compete but to promote camaraderie, friendship through this event. Julie?
The members of the Church of Christ from different parts of Madrid region were gathered for the event. Welcome, my brethren, and for the Unity Games.
The Unity Unity Games Madrid region is an activity approved by the administration of the Church of Christ, which was held in Colegio Paraíso Sagrados Corazones. The participants are from different local congregations, including Madrid Sur, Madrid Norte, and Madrid. Players would unite in such different sports, including football, basketball, volleyball, and table tennis. Chess was also enjoyed by the participants. Addition to this, an event Welcome My Brethren was also held in the same venue that aims to welcome those friends and relatives that were being invited to become a member of the Church of Christ.
Ang pagkakaiba ng larong pampaligsahan sa Iglesia ni Cristo kaysa sa labas ng Iglesia ni Cristo. Unang-una, sa Iglesia, tinatawag itong Unity Games. Kasi sa labas naman ng Iglesia ni Cristo, hindi naman po ito tinatawag na Unity Games. Kundi yun ay sports na pampalakasan. Pangalawa, ang hangad naman po ng Iglesia ni Cristo kung bakit nagsasagawa ng Unity Games ay hindi po para makamit yung kanilang inaasahan lang na manalo, kundi may pagtagumpay yung tinatawag nga na unity o pagkakaisa ng mga kaanib sa loob ng Iglesia ni Cristo.
Ang layunin po nito ay para po makatugon po sa panawagan ng ating pamamahala at magkaisa po ang bawat lokal sa ating distrito, ganoon na rin po ang bawat kapisanan. At sa po ng Diyos, naging matagumpay naman po. Nagsagawa po kami ng 1 linggong panata, bawat may tungkulin. Ayun po, naging matagumpay po ang aming ginawang Unity Games. Salamat po.
Of this activity consists on uniting brethren through sports. At the end, win or lose, all brethren remain bonded together, participating in all activities launched by the church administration. Reporting from Madrid, Spain, I am Juliana Ala, and I am one with Trinity.
In Brooklyn, New York, 2 weeks after a shooting tragedy in Brownsville, the community there gathered for an afternoon of neighborly love and much-needed relief. The Felix Y. Manalo Foundation and the Church of Christ, for its first stop in its USA tour, brought aid to humanity to this neighborhood. Joan Blanco reports.
I was born and raised in Brownsville, and Brownsville is a very beautiful, loving community. On July 27th, just a couple of weeks ago, we were hit with something very tragic that has never happened to us. We were celebrating Brownsville Old Timers Day, and at the end of our community event, 2 gunmen opened fire on the playground and shot 12 people.
When mass shootings and gun violence hit other cities across America, the nation mourned with the victims of El Paso, Texas and Gilroy, California during the same time period, while the incident in Brownsville, Brooklyn did not receive nearly as much coverage or attention.
Growing up, and especially in this community, we always felt like we were alone and nobody else. We in a corner of Brooklyn somewhere and we're forgotten.
The community of Brownsville gathered again in the very same spot where tragedy struck just 2 weeks earlier, this time for a chance to heal and regain hope through an Aid to Humanity community outreach by the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation and the Iglesia ni Cristo. Foreign, state, and local dignitaries delivered messages of hope and strength to the 2,000 people gathered on Hegeman Avenue. Donation checks were presented to 9 Brownsville organizations to help with their mission of providing services to the immediate community.
We are so appreciative of the FYM Foundation that they came to our aid in a much needed time. They have no idea what this money is going to do for the community, for the Brownsville community. We so much appreciate it from the bottom of our heart.
It's a wonderful effect on the community. I feel now that we can really get together as one whole to really be here for each other.
I'm feeling very moved, emotional, because this is the exact spot, the catalyst that set all this into motion, where our young brother Jason was killed right here at the same spot. And we all came out, that you guys came out in solidarity and supported us. That really touched my heart. I really appreciate that.
Unfortunate that what happened had to happen in order for our community to see that we have support all over the world, but we have it, and we needed that. We needed the hope that we got help, that people got our back.
The program concluded with a distribution of Goodwill bags to the families and residents of Brownsville, containing food, toiletries, school supplies, and toys.
This event is going to have lasting effect on the community, and it's a model of hope and friendship. It only takes a spark to get the fire going, and I believe this spark is big, and what you're doing for the NGOs, they can in turn help themselves and help others.
This was the first stop of the Aid to Humanity tour across 8 U.S. cities. Reporting from Brownsville, Brooklyn, and New York, this is Joanne Soriano for Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Alma Angeles, and we're 1 with 25.